Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the SAEYLS Online Forum 2020. The purpose of this forum is to give presentations on research categories through Google Meet and have online discussion with other participants. The participants will investigate and research on a theme related to their given topic and present their results in the forum. Other participants will be able to ask questions during the Q&A session. First, please allow me to introduce myself. I'm Kaylee, and I'll be serving as the moderator for this forum. Before we welcome our first presenter, here's a short outline on what this topic is about. Social inequality is the existence of unequal opportunities and rewards for different social positions or statuses within a group or society. For example, we have the income gap, gender inequality, healthcare, and quality education. The way people behave socially tends to trickle down and affect the opportunities individuals can generate for themselves. In this forum today, we hope to address ways on how to move the world forward in reducing social inequality. Now, we will welcome our first presenter, Robert Nelson R. Leong, to give his presentation.
Hi, mic test. Am I audible? Can someone from the panel just confirm?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. So good afternoon, everyone watching the live stream. I'm Robert Leong, though I prefer to go by the name Toby. I'm going to give a discussion on socio-economic and healthcare inequality. So if you please allow me to share my slides. All right, I think the slides are visible.
Yeah, we can see your slides.
I'll begin shortly. Before I begin, I would just like to preface this by saying I'm by no means an economist, and I also recognize that I'm a privileged person in this situation. So I come from a relatively...
Sorry to interrupt, Toby, but we can't see your slides now.
Oh, I think it's coming in a bit. Can you see the thing at the side, or no?
Yeah, we can.
All right. Thank you. All right, I think that's fine. But anyways, that's just the preface I want to give. I'll begin shortly. 3, 2, 1. A new threat is sweeping across the globe. COVID-19, as we all know, has infected hundreds of thousands and has the potential to claim millions of lives. But why is it that the virus, so similar to the common cold, has caused so much economic damage? The answer lies not in the nature of the virus itself, but rather in the symptoms of a deeper, more profound disease. A virus that has spread across the globe. A virus that we've failed to diagnose, and a virus that robs millions of their dignity every year. This isn't COVID-19. Panel, these are the symptoms of healthcare and socio-economic inequality. Good afternoon. In this talk, I want to demonstrate how the effects of the pandemic we currently see are linked to symptoms of a deeper problem, which is socio-economic and healthcare inequality. Specifically, I'll be going over the question of what does healthcare inequality actually look like and what might we be able to do about it. There are 3 main parts to this talk. First, I want to discuss the relative cost of prevention. So why diseases affect poor communities differently and why poverty forces you to deprioritize health. Second, I want to talk about unequal access to cures, that there are high barriers to treatment, and millions every year still die from diseases that have been considered cured. And finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we can do to improve, how we can recover from this virus, how we can make healthcare more equitable, and what solutions we might need, and why we need to start rethinking our approach to health. But before that, I want to provide a brief background on socioeconomic inequality. Now, the past 10 years, to be fair, have been a period of unprecedented economic growth. 50 million people in ASEAN alone have been lifted out of poverty into the lower middle class. But that's at the surface, and people believed that economic growth would be the solution to poverty. Clearly, it wasn't. In the 3 years after the 2008 financial crash, 91% of economic gains went to the 1%. The people who were the working class actually saw their median wage stagnate. So even if the GDP was growing, the Gini index, or the index of inequality in these countries, was actually rising. People weren't feeling conditions on the ground improve because wealth was being distributed to the people at the top. Of course, at the very top, you have people like Jeff Bezos, who during a pandemic has seen his fortune grow by $28.3 billion. We'll talk a little bit more about him later in the context of what his money could do to improve healthcare. The situation is the same in ASEAN. Out of all of the SDGs, reducing wealth inequality is actually the one thing we are sliding back on. We've actually made less progress in reducing inequality than we have before the ASEAN had formed. The top 1% in Thailand own 58% of the nation's wealth. The top 10% of Filipino families make 9 times more than the bottom 10%. Ultimately, the United Nations Institute for Development Research estimates that 580 million people will return to poverty due to the pandemic. And that's not a coincidence. It's because while these people were rising, we weren't investing in social safety nets for them. Most of these people lived in a state of instability. They made just enough each month to buy their monthly wages or to buy their monthly groceries. They made just enough each month to send their children to school. And all it would take was a single shock to send them back down into poverty. And in early 2020, that shock came. This leads me to the first portion of my talk. Now, what you're seeing here is a photo of the prisons of the Philippines, which are some of the most crowded in the world, along with the slums of the Philippines. While you and I can stay at home and prevent the virus that way, many of these people don't have that choice. These people are forced to live in cramped conditions. In fact, one 61-year-old inmate told Al Jazeera that his life was at that point in time was just waiting to die, waiting for the virus to claim him. That's because there's a different cost to prevention for you and me and the people at the bottom. To them, the choice is sickness or starvation. What do I mean by that? Firstly, it's a fact. If you look at the data, it shows that poor communities are more affected by viral illnesses like COVID-19 and like other pandemics in the past. The reason for this is because several reasons. Simply put, intuitively, you know that poor people can't buy PPEs, they can't afford it as much. But also psychologically, they're more likely to put themselves at risk because they have to keep their job to keep their families alive. They have to keep their job to make sure that their children can go to school every day. And doing that means exposing yourself to the virus. Doing that means exposing yourself to a variety of illnesses without the proper protective equipment. This is a situation that we've been facing for years. And now with COVID-19, we're seeing the ramifications of it. 7.5 million businesses in the US alone risk closure. That means 35 million people are likely to lose their jobs. And who is the government bailing out? Not these small businesses. They're bailing out large corporations, people who are already wealthy and people who are already at the top. The threat to the poor isn't just financial, it's also psychological. In the recent pandemic, we've seen rates of anxiety and PTSD increase in poor communities. We've seen rates of domestic violence increase in poor communities. We see that the cost for people at the bottom to stay at home is very different from the cost that you or me face. But why should we care, right? We're privileged. We get to live in the comfort of our own homes. The reason is, those who cannot stay at home become carriers. And society as a whole pays the price. We saw this happen in Singapore, where it was the immigrant communities that eventually became the centers of outbreaks because they had to live in cramped quarters and because they had no alternatives. This is why the cost of prevention is highly different, and this is why inequality matters in dealing with a pandemic. But what happens when they eventually do get sick, right? What happens when the unemployment rates go to a record high and people eventually do have to go to the hospital because of the virus? This is another photo taken from the Philippines. I'm sure you've seen many photos like this online. Healthcare workers working their hardest to deal with patients with inadequate facilities. This is because the poor have to pay for an ounce of cure, the poor have to pay a pound of coal, or a pound of their livelihood, or everything they've made just to access cures to very basic diseases that we've treated in the past. This isn't unique to COVID-19. The WHO estimates that every year, 745,000 children still die from measles, a disease that we've made a vaccine for 50 years ago. In 2016, 1.6 million people still died from diabetes. And that's no coincidence. It's because insulin prices over the last decade haven't gone down, even with the access to generic medicines and even with access to new research. Markets and corporations are keeping the prices of cures high, making sure that people on the ground have to pay massive insurance costs. And people who need the cures the most are the people who are being denied of treatment. And that is the price they pay. It isn't just in terms of the cures itself. It also matters what nation you're from. The race for a vaccine to COVID is likely to be affected by vaccine nationalism, a new and rising phenomenon, where countries are taking a my nation first approach. That's to say, the US bought up the entire stock of remdesivir, a drug which reduces hospital times for COVID, even at the cost of developing countries. So even if a vaccine does get developed by 2021, it probably won't reach the developing world where the most number of people are dying for another couple of years. And that's the scale of inequality we're dealing with. That's the type of inequality we have to face. So you might think this is something that's insurmountable, something that's so hard to deal with and so hard to make the situation better. But in reality, if returning to the statistics of how much Jeff Bezos makes, he makes enough to buy a ventilator every 10 seconds. In a couple of weeks, he'd have enough to buy ventilators to double the supply of ventilators at every US hospital. Subsidizing an ICU cost in the Philippines with $1 million could subsidize 140,000 hours of ICU cost in the Philippines. This is but a fraction of the wealth of the 1%, and this is but a fraction of the money they're going to continue to make. But it costs lives, and it is the lives of the people at the bottom that are lost when we do not take this opportunity. This leads me to the last part of my talk. How can we get better? What can we do to recover from, and how do we achieve equity in healthcare? I admit that this is a structural problem and it's going to be very difficult to solve. I don't have all of the solutions, but I think we need to start looking at healthcare access and inequality not as privileges, but as a right that every community has. We need to look at new ways of providing social welfare. For instance, with the rise of COVID-19, people have been looking at providing people with a universal basic income. So no matter who you are, no matter where you live, you'd be guaranteed a monthly check from the government. While some people consider that handouts, it might be the solution to the economic pressure they face. Because whether or not they lose their job, they can now afford to stay at home. They can now afford to keep themselves and their families safe. They don't have to face the relative cost of prevention. They don't have to face the relative barriers to accessing cures. There are many different solutions we can begin looking at. But I think it starts with improving our social welfare systems and seriously considering more redistributive policies, especially in the developing world, especially in countries like Asia, which are now seeing inequality rise. At the end of the day, what I want you to take away is this. The greatest threat to human life is not any single disease, but inequality that has robbed us of our humanity and will continue to plague us unless we start taking global action now and we start making things more equitable now. Thanks, everyone. These are my sources.
Thank you, Robert. Now it'll be time for our Q&A session. Does any participant have a question they would like to put forward to Robert?
I do have a question for Robert. So, it seems like this problem has been ongoing for years and has been a systemic issue. What do you think is the most effective way we as youth can do to prevent this problem from going on any longer?
You're right. It is
Sorry to interrupt, Robert, but can you stop your screen sharing, please?
Oh, sorry. Is that all right now? Is that better?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so to address Hulwa's question, she's right. It's a systematic problem and it's very hard to solve. As the youth, I think the most important things for us to do are twofold. Firstly, we have to be active in political participation. So many of us are over 18 and many of us are aware of campaigns to improve healthcare. In the Philippines recently, healthcare workers are trying to take a strike and trying to take a stance against our government. And a lot of the people that are improving and promoting the efforts that they're making are people from among the youth. People who are heading movements and people who are supporting them. Secondly, of course, I would say to the youth to inform yourself, know about the problem. Because the biggest problem we have right now is that people don't even know that people die from measles. People don't know how many people die from diabetes. People don't know how inaccessible healthcare is. And that's, I think, then awareness in itself, I think, will be a big health solving problem.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Hua, for your question. Does any other participant have a question for Robert? If there's no questions, we will move on for the questions from the YouTube Live. First of all, why do you think that our society has failed to protect the most vulnerable people from the virus?
All right, thanks for the question. It's interesting, and I think there are lots of different answers. In some cases, it's stigma. So in a lot of countries with ethnic divides, the ethnic minority is not provided healthcare. So I don't want to name examples, but I'm sure you can think of some in your own minds. Oftentimes, people don't build hospitals in that area because they don't think the people there are deserving of healthcare. They're not deserving of treatment. Other times, it's because there isn't enough political will. So sometimes societies really do want to protect the vulnerable, but people aren't going out and there isn't real representation for that mindset. I think many societies now have developing political parties, and I think that's a good trend. So mostly it's stigma and it's deep-rooted cultural ties with those people.
Thank you. Now, our next question. How would you tackle the mindset of people who believe that healthcare shouldn't be universal and accessible to everyone?
Right. So this is a pressing problem, especially in countries like the Philippines and the United States, which have private healthcare system, or which have large private healthcare systems. What I would answer to that is I think you have to first convince them logically that if you were to get sick, you wouldn't want to have to pay insurance. You could have been born as anyone in this world. You could have been born poor. You just got lucky that you were born with enough money to pay for your healthcare costs. And being healthy isn't something that's a privilege. It isn't something that you have to afford. It's something that you deserve. It's something that you have a right to as a human being. Of course, I can't guarantee that that will work in all instances, but I think it's a good start to the conversation.
One more. Free healthcare is said to be a good implementation. However, do you think that the upper class and the underprivileged are entitled to this right?
I would say yeah. I would say so. Yes. I think, irregardless, whether or not you're rich, whether or not you're underprivileged, healthcare is something we should provide to you on the basis of the fact that you are human, and we want you to be a functioning member of society. And to see you at your best, you have to be healthy. In order for you to have a job, in order for you to contribute to the economy, you have to be in a state of good health. So it is a right that everyone should have.
Next question. Are governments allocating adequate funds to the healthcare sectors globally? And are those funds distributed fairly?
So there's a lot of research on this. I encourage you to do your own reading on the topic. But I would say some governments are definitely better than others. So if you look at the Nordic countries, they have lots of investment in public healthcare and very strong equitable distributions of healthcare. In other countries like developing states or even certain first world countries, most of the healthcare funds go to already major areas. So cities, they don't go to rural areas where people can't reach hospitals. And that's a problem that I think they're still dealing with now.
Next question. Do you think that universal and free healthcare will have negative repercussions on a country's economy?
Again, so this is another interesting topic where there's lots of research. I think the research shows that if people can pay for healthcare, they're more able to contribute to the economy. So a lot of our economic loss comes from when people get sick and they can't pay or go into loans, or because they can't pay their hospital bills. Like when you get sick and no one's there to take care of you, or in the worst case you die, obviously that's a worker that is lost from the economy. I'm oversimplifying it a lot, but let's just say that health is the first prerequisite to having economic growth in many instances.
Thank you, Robert, for your presentation and for answering all the questions. We'll take a 5-minute break before we continue on to our next presenter. Do remember to turn off your videos and your mics. I hope to see all of you later. Hi everyone, our short break has ended, and we will now welcome our second presenter. Now we welcome Hulwa Aulia Suryadi to give her presentation.
I'm Aulia Suryadi from SMA Negeri 10 Samarinda, Indonesia. Please allow me to screen share my presentation slide. Can you see my presentation slide?
It's on portrait mode. Can you make it landscape?
Wait, is it okay now?
No, it's still the same as just now.
Okay, wait. How about now?
No, it's still the same. But Hua, would you mind
Yeah.
if our tech support team presents your slides instead?
Oh yeah, it's fine.
Tech support, please present Hua's slides.
Yeah. I'm Hulwa Aulia Suryadi from SMA Negeri 10 Samarinda, Indonesia, and I'm going to talk about gender inequality in Indonesia. The purpose of my research is to give information about the situation in Indonesia and also to raise the awareness about the importance of equality in the society. Moving on to the next slide. Yeah. Gender inequality was born because of the thoughts that one gender is more superior than the other. In many cases, it's mainly men who are considered on the upper level, resulting in the thoughts that resulting in the thoughts that women only deserve to be below men and that women could never achieve or be in the same position as men. These thoughts are the root of the patriarchal culture. After decades of being treated unfairly, women all around the world starting to realize their worth and chose to fight against the injustice and initiate change through gender equality movements. One of the biggest breakthroughs of the gender equality movement was the creation of UN Women on July 2nd of 2010. Same with other countries. Uh, Same with other countries. In patriarchal culture in Indonesia has been such a tradition in society for so long. This was shown on how people would think that women should only be placed on the domestic realm and how women's lives are all about kitchen, cleaning, and be good wives to their husbands. Women were also more likely to be respected because of their status as someone's wives, someone's daughters, or someone's relatives, when in reality they should be respected because because as a human being. Moving on to the next slide. Despite all of that, some women recognized the injustice and chose to fight against it at that time. Many women in Indonesia have been fighting for gender equality way before it was declared as global goal. Some women, way before it was declared as global goal. Uh, this woman unfortunately didn't get enough the recognition that they deserve. Starting from the colonial era, many women fought against the injustice of the colonialism, not only through their direct involvement in wars such as Cut Nyak Dien, Cut Mutia, and Marta Tristina Tiahua, but several women also had the courage to demand and propose several resolutions to the colonial government. It is also important to note that regarding the involvement of women in the public domain era during the colonial era, in December 1928, the Women Organization conducted the first Women Congress in which identified three challenges faced by women during that era. In addition to women bearing arms and also maneuvering within formal politics, some women were highly prominent in fighting for access to education, such as Maria Walanda Maramit, Dewi Sartika, and Rohana Kudus, and also Raden Ajeng Kartini, the icon of women's emancipation in Indonesia. All these incredible women might be striving in different ways, but one thing for sure is They were pushing for women's rights to be heard in Indonesia's society, where patriarchal culture has been such a lifestyle for way too long. Moving on to the next slide. Then, after all, uh, after all the sacrifices that have been done by countless amazing women, how does the government deal with uh, somehow gender inequality remains in Indonesia? It even seems like the movement is going on regression. Legal barriers in some key areas, coupled with patriarchal culture and religious conservatisms, continue to prevent girls and women from fulfilling their rights. There are still so many gender inequalities in Indonesia, from having fewer chances in receiving better education and health services to the huge wage gap, and also the very few representative in the political field, and much more unfairness that women in Indonesia have to face on the daily basis. Out of all the problems, I'm going to talk about the two major issues Indonesia is dealing with right now, which are the women harassment and also child marriage. Also, the first topic, which is harassment on women. According to the 2019 YouGov Omnibus research, 31% of Indonesian women have experienced sexual harassment compared to 7% of men. Of those who have experienced sexual harassment, only 42% of them who have told someone about it or reported about the incident. Another national survey done by the Coalition of Safe Public Space also revealed that at least 3 out of 5 women in Indonesia have experienced sexual harassment in public spaces. The survey also highlighted that the respondents faced 19 forms of harassment, which include verbal, physical, and non-physical. Moving on to our next topic, which is child marriage. Not only women are harassed in their social lives, but they also face legal barriers and discrimination in the economy. According to the recent study, the main reason of women labor force participation is much lower than the men is because of marriage. Which is also connected to the fact that 11% of women were first married at the age of younger than 15. Child marriage is a very serious problem as it impacts women's and girls' lives, resulting in poor health and also education outcomes, reducing employability, and also higher risk of abuse and also violence. Marriage at such a young age disrupts women's education and hinders their ability to get a better job if they later decide to enter the employment market. Indonesian society, according to the tradition, still firmly believes that men are the sole breadwinners in households. The deeply rooted patriarchal culture makes most Indonesians stay at home or work informally. And as we can see, and the statistics are the percentage of women who are already married at age less than 18, but based on their places they live in, and also the average of education length for women in Indonesia. Moving on to our next slide. Then, after all the statistics, how does the government then after all the statistics, how does the government deal with gender inequality in Indonesia? The government is striving to actualize the fifth principle of Indonesian fundamental ideology, which is Pancasila, that is social justice for all the people of Indonesia. In this case, they are doing that by first working together with worldwide organizations such as UN Women, UNDP, WHO, and also ILO, and many other organizations. Not only they are working with these worldwide organizations, but they are also has made several constitutions, policies, and programs in regarding the fight to end gender inequality. Uh, one of the one of the constitution was the of the requirement of 30%, at least 30% of the nomination list for the legislature in Indonesia have to be reserved for the woman candidate. Another program done by the government was Girls Takeover, which is a program led by the Indonesian Finance Minister, Mem Sri Mulyani, which the purpose of it was to raise the awareness about the woman's role in the public spaces, and also not only that, it's nowadays it seems like the government has is paying more attention to this issue by one of them is by the recognizing the sexual violence eradication bill, which has yet to be legalized. After all, it seems that the government has done is not doing much, but they are surely working on it. Next slide. Moving on to the most important part of my presentation, what we can do to help. So, gender inequality is not only the government's problem, but it is also our responsibility to ensure that everyone has their rights and get the justice that they deserve. There are so many ways we as youth can do to help. One of them was to call out sexism and harassment. Based on the statistics that I've mentioned on the women harassment, uh, there are so many forms of harassment, and it is so important for us to understand about it so that we can identify and intervene it when we witness it ourselves. Because it seems now that there are still not so many people understand about it, and also many people still do not pay enough attention to it. Incidences of sexual harassment has been such a plague in Indonesia, and the methods taken by the government has yet to protect women from it. So it is the time for us to protect each other instead of just depending on the government. It is time for us to protect each other, and by making sure that everyone feels safe in the public spaces. Also, the second one is to commit to a cause. Initiating change needs to start within ourselves, and there's nothing such as two small actions. The first and the most important, way is to just show up and show that we care about an issue. We can start by sharing an article or news about it, or we can. The most important, the one thing is to open the discussion, bring up this topic, bring up this issue as a conversation or a discussion on our real life, on with our families and our friends, so that more people understand about the issue and more people are aware about the issue. And the last one is to teach girls their worth. As I've stated before, that child marriage has always been one of Indonesia's serious issue regarding to the gender inequality. Putting Indonesia up to among the 10 countries with the highest child brides. But child marriage is a complex problem, as it is influenced by several factors such as socioeconomic, education, religious interpretation, and tradition. So therefore, we need also a multidimensional approach in regarding to responding to that. And also, the survey stated that there are three actions that are needed to be done in order to protect girls from child marriage, which are providing access to formal education, and also educating youth on the reproductive health and rights. And also the most important one is to promoting gender equality on the grassroots level. So that is all I have to say about this topic. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Hua, for your presentation. Now we'll have our Q&A session. Does any participant have any questions they would like to put forward to Hua?
Hi, Hulwa. I have a question for you. So, one of the reasons women are afraid to come out with their stories is because they're scared of victim blaming, that people will say it was their fault that they were sexually harassed. How do you think we can deal with that?
For me, I think the best way to respond to this kind of people who like to victim blaming is to educate them. Yes, I know their opinion is so wrong on so many levels, but if we are just going to judge them, and then they won't think otherwise. And also, we need to educate them. We need to educate those people. How can we do? How can we educate them? We can start by reminding them that how harmful their opinion is, because by blaming the victim, they are also agreeing to the action done by the perpetrator, and it is also discrediting the victim. Victim blaming is the main reason why women or victim doesn't chose to stay silent on their harassment, because they think that no matter what, there will always be people who believes in and put the narrative that the victims are always at fault. And it is also the victim blaming is also allowing the perpetrators to continue their crimes. So the best way to respond it to is just to educate them. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Robert, for the question, and thank you, Hua, for your answer. Does any other participant have a question for Hua? If no one has a question for Hua, we'll move on to the questions from the YouTube Live. For the first question, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it to have equality from all aspects in our society?
From scale 1 to 10, of course it is 10. Equality is just like what Robert did on his presentation. Equality is something that a human is born into, you know. Equality is part of that human. So, yeah, it is important, really important.
Thank you, Hua. We'll move on to our next question. What is an example of the patriarchy in Indonesia?
The patriarchy in Indonesia, maybe it's just like in other countries, but it's worse. And one of them was in the job section. You know, there are things such in the society. There are things such as this is a woman's job, and that is a man's job. That's the kind of patriarchal culture we have in Indonesia in the job area.
Thank you. Now, to our next question. Don't you think it is also important to include the LGBTQ community in discussions about gender inequality?
Of course, yes, it is. And I think about Indonesia, because we are so full of religious conservatism. It is also more important for the youth of Indonesia to speak up on the LGBTQ community, because because in Indonesia it's still such a taboo to talk about LGBTQ. It is what happening in Indonesia right now, and so as the youth, we need to open the gate. We need to bring up such things into the discussions.
Thank you to everyone for their questions, and thank you, Hua, for your presentation and answering everybody's questions. Now we will move on with our 5-minute break before we continue on to our next presenter. Please do turn off your microphones and switch off your cameras. See all of you shortly.
or if it's like
Welcome back, everyone. Our short break has ended. Now, we welcome our third presenter, Charlotte Fabiana Frastika Tinambunan.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, in the live stream as well. So today I'm going to present about health gap in Indonesia. So please allow me to screen share my presentation slide. You guys can see my screen?
Sorry, Charlotte, but we can't see your screen. Oh, now I can see it.
Okay. How about now?
Yeah.
Is it visible? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to start it. So I'm Charlotte Fabiana. I'm from SMA Negeri Samarinda, Indonesia, and I'm going to present about health gap. So the first thing that I would like to tell to all of you guys is about what is health gap, what is actually health gap is. So health gap are difference or gaps in the equality of healthcare or medical service because of several regions that still not provided proper medical services. And this commonly we could figure out on our society that being a serious issue of unequal human rights. So it contains structure and recurrent patterns of unequal distribution of good, wealth, opportunities, rewards, and punishment. These inequalities are often transferred into the field of health, which can be seen at the unequal health condition of different groups, the levels of health rates to which this group are exposed, and also in terms of differential access to the resource available in the health system. And it is no coincidence that most of inequalities observed in the area of health are directly related to inequalities observed in other levels of social life. Health inequality generates unequal possibilities in relation to the ability to take advantage of scientific and the technological advance in this area. So different chains of exposure to the factor that determine health and disease in the same way that social inequalities exist in all countries, regardless of their level of development, health inequality exists in the same way. And there is many evidence of social factor, including education, employment status, income gap, gender, ethnicity, and gender have a marked influence on how healthy a person is. In all countries, whether low or high income, there are wide disparities in health status of different social group. So the lower an individual social economic position, the higher their rates of poor health. So health inequality are systematic difference in the health status of different population groups. So these inequalities have significant social and economic costs both to individual and society. So besides how people with lower social economic positions have been treated differently, main problem that might worsen the status of health inequality is how unequal distribution of medical service and facilities. So let's take a look on the screen. So let's take a look on the data on the screen. So it was how Indonesia looked like on the map. So our country is, as you guys can see on the screen, our country is divided by by several big islands. And for the capital government, it stay in Java, which is marked as a blue one. So let's consider this one. It shows there's approximately 30 until 40,000 ish medical service such as doctor, nurse, and also specialized focus on that area. Meanwhile, in other region who mark as a red, it's about around 19,000 or even less than 1,000 medical service spread in the region, especially in remote area that's really hard to reach. And we can see, and also as well as the graph and at the graphic beside the maps. So it showed that amount of medical facilities that support everyone's health status. So the graph is decreasing depends on the region itself. Farther away from the center of the government, then we could see how decreased amount of facilities were. So we can see here it decreased slowly. Depends of the position farther away from the capital government. So then what is the factor of unequal medical service and facilities distribution? So especially in Indonesia, the main problem in our country divided by several islands, as what I've mentioned earlier, and it's definitely hard to reach every single area, especially in the remote areas. So the connectivity definitely being the big role for spatial equal to spread equal health facilities for human beings. So this factor, besides could be risk amount of health gap, it also can increase social inequality status. For example, those who has a good position in social economic will get good service because in the region have been provided by enough medical service and facilities. Meanwhile, in those in remote area just get standard service and facilities that's not really capable enough to support their in-health status. So we can see how health gap being a big impact for a human being that should have equal human right as well as other who didn't live in remote areas. So from the data above, we can figure out the fact that health gap causes a lot of cases that disrupt human well-being. So by that, here we figure out several impacts from healthcare point of view that disturbing country prosperous and also being problem that we concerned about. There are medical service and facilities distribution were not spread evenly, cause maternal mortality and malnutrition. So let's move on to maternal death. So what is maternal death? So maternal death is the death of a woman during pregnancy, at delivery, or soon after delivery, or even at the pregnancy. So major things that made number of maternal mortality high in Indonesia are infection. It is basically happen when after the childbirth. So a complication, self bleeding, and also unsafe abortion. Then we must be confusing about why women don't get the care they needed. So several studies have indicated the main factor associated with high maternal mortality, including a low quality of skilled birth attendance care, including low competence of skilled birth attendants and the lack of access to functional, comprehensive, and basic emergency at obstetrical care facilities. Also, poverty, distance of facilities like information, poor quality service, cultural belief, and practice being main factor why women don't get care they needed. So in Indonesia, obviously in the remote area, in the unreachable area, we still believe that to deliver a baby, they usually still use like a cultural beliefs, like a cultural practice. So they don't go to a hospital because of the distance and because of ineffective facilities and medical service there. So we can see that this factor will not be happen if medical service facilities provided in the region. So because of the lack of it, it can cause high number of maternal death in Indonesia. According to maternal death, in Indonesia make all people, especially government, to take action to push the higher number of the cause, also to protect all mom and baby as a whole. And not only maternal death, we also have to concern about all children around the world, especially in Indonesia, about how important fulfilled the nutrition and about the malnutrition. So what is malnutrition? Malnutrition is access or imbalance in person intake of energy and nutrition. So generally this has been happened toward children in remote area which lack of public health and care and facilities to educate people, especially parents, there about how important to give such enough nutrition toward their children. So This might happen because of the distance of the regions or lack of attention according to healthcare stuff. So, and many families cannot afford and access enough nutrition. Why? Because because of the long distance from the downtown. So, like a fresh fruit and vegetable and meat is really expensive. Rather, compared to the salt and sugar are more cheaper and are more available in their region. So it's quite common to find undernutrition and overweight within the same community household or even individual where we also can see how big the distance about human existence around the world that has been problem. Next. So in this slide, we could see how the graphic, how the graphic show us about stunting, trends, and burden of malnutrition. It said that it were about 7% children had stunting and around 30.7% children underweight because of suffering of not affordable nutrition provided in the region malnutrition. So Indonesia experienced a malnutrition burden among its under 5 population as 2030. The national prevalence of under 5 overweight is 11.5%, which has decreased slightly from 12.3% in 2010. And Indonesia, and Indonesia, we're still suffering about it. So yeah, we can see it from the data. So move on to the maternity death. It shows like there's a big top 3 that being a main problem of our maternity mortality death. So there are premature birth trauma and this one. So in 2017, also for the maternal mortality ratio in Indonesia is higher contagiously concerned through the statistic development. It is estimated that 20,000 women die from complication of pregnancy or childbirth per 5 million births each year. So according to United Nations Development Program, the rate of a maternal death in Indonesia is 1 in 65 mothers. So as if to say, if there's still a lack of education about how important nutrition really needed for children's adequate health service, equally that the mortality rate will be even higher and than the data that I shared. So a new generation that's supposed to reach their bright future can be safe, or in the other hand, they're supposed to have another supporting essential to support their nutrition health besides the facilities such as electricity, flexible to access food with high nutrition in case they can grow up as well as other kids in other side of the region that have fulfilled their life essential. Again, it's about equal human being. And for the mother after birth, they are deserve to have a professional service to support them before and after birth to avoid maternity death. If we're not concerned about it, again, ratio of maternity death will be increased. Then, what is the government point of view about this issue? So, the government deal with the gap of with health gap happen in Indonesia, the government should stand up against social issue, especially health inequality. So in this case, we working together with like worldwide organizations such as UNICEF, United Nations Development Program, UN Women, World Health Organization, and many others to strive this issue. And also human right access in the Constitution, and also access in our ideology, which is Pancasila, and being government obligation to raise it and fulfill it. So, however, our government already have a policy that have invested their money to spread equal facilities and infrastructure to unreachable area. So make a connectivity need as and give internship and give a life allowance to medical service that placed in remote area. Also, government has an internship program for fresh graduate of medical students to place them in unreachable area around 1 year as a form of devotion. Okay.
Hi Charlotte, sorry to interrupt, but just a reminder, you have 1 minute left.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, and after that, there's a lot of association that in the Indonesia that we have like Gerakan Sayang Ibu, which is like to love mother. This is for the information program from many village to provide transportation to transfer pregnant women either to community, and this one is 1000 Hari Pertama Kehidupan, which is called the first 1000 days of life, and it's recognition to critical period of addressing malnutrition between pregnancy and child second stage. So what shall we do as a youth? And this is last but not least, so we can raise awareness about equal medical service for everyone as a human being, and then the charity program to work children and women in remote area, join association that support and of healthcare. And I just would like to remind that, as I've mentioned earlier, that healthcare is one of human right that every single person must have. So no wonder who they are, everyone should have equal right. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte, for your presentation. Now we will have our Q&A session. Does any other participant have questions they would like to put forward to Charlotte?
Hi, yes, I have a question for Charlotte. What do you think is the best way to improve the healthcare system in rural areas, such as the infrastructure and the service given to the people there?
Okay, thank you for the question, Shanira. So, for me, to improve the healthcare system in the remote area, I think we have to improve develop and provided the access first to reach the remote area. So to reach the unreachable area. So why? Because facilities and infrastructure of healthcare distribute easily if we have access. So and I think about develop the quality of medical service itself, and what I mentioned earlier about the life allowance that we have to give to medical service that work at the remote area.
Thank you, Shanira, for your question, and thank you, Charlotte, for your answer. Does any other participant have any more questions they would like to ask Charlotte? If it's a no, we'll move on to our questions from the YouTube Live. First of all, what are the causes of... How do we identify and get the healthcare facilities to the people who need it the most?
Okay, thank you for the question. So for me, it's about a priority. So we have to know about which region that really need most about healthcare and facilities about and facilities. So we have to put a lot of we have to know about which priority that we have to being the first thing that we have to help them. So yeah, I think that is the best way for identify and for get a healthcare and facilities to people who need it most.
Now, for the next question, what are the causes of the unequal distribution of healthcare facilities and medical services?
Oh, okay. As I've mentioned before, and I already say it on my presentation, that the causes of unequal distribution of healthcare facilities. So we can beside of lack of nutrition and juga lack of medical service, and we can and the death ratio will be, and the graphic of death ratio will be increased even more higher than the last year. So I think that will be like the big problem of all countries if we still if we still not concerned about unequal distribution.
Thank you. And our last question, how is the healthcare system in Indonesia work?
Okay, this is like the interesting question. So, how is the healthcare system in Indonesia work? I think I accidentally my mom also worked in medical service, so she always every weekend, not really weekend, but uh, she she just like doing survey to a remote area. So why I'm really concerned about this topic, because yeah, I have seen my mom that she struggling to reach the unreachable area, and she tried to help people there, and in with improper growth there. So, and after she come back from her work from the unreachable area, she always told me about how the situation of people there, and they really needed about healthcare facilities and systems. So my mom can inform to the other healthcare system, that yeah, this area is really needed for the healthcare system. So I think it's about like the survey first and do the priority, and yeah, spread the equal distribution of the healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte, for answering all the questions, and thank you for your presentation. Now we will move on to the 5-minute break, and please don't forget to turn off your cameras and mics, and see all of you after this break. Alright, everyone, our short break has ended. And now, we'll welcome our next presenter, Shanira Karuna Nar, to give her presentation.
Hi everybody, my name is Shanira. I'm from Sri Aman Girls High School, Malaysia. My research topic for today is gender inequality at workplaces. Please allow me to share my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Okay. Let's start with what gender inequality is. By definition, gender inequality is giving people different opportunities due to perceived differences solely based off their genders. Thus, gender inequality at workplaces is gender-based imbalances of individuals in power and command over management. My first question is, why is gender inequality still happening in the 21st century? Well, the first reason might be due to traditions. People are trying to keep to their traditions and what they're taught. Last time, women were expected to stay at home and help around the house, while men went to work and boys went to school. And they were expected to keep to these teachings, thus leading to more women not being expected to work and men being expected to work a lot more. Other than that, gender inequality is talked about so often. We hear it everywhere we go. We hear so many people say gender inequality should be stopped. It's bad. But how many people do we know that is actually trying to mitigate this crisis? Other than that, it is also due to gender norms and stereotypes. The different genders are perceived to act a certain way. They are perceived to act or fulfill a specific stereotype and have a specific set of skills, which will only increase the likelihood of gender inequality at workplaces. With gender inequality comes a lot of cons, and I have highlighted two disadvantages that might happen at workplaces due to gender inequality. The first one being corporation disadvantages. When there is no variation in point of views, there is a lack in dynamic discussion. Because corporations might have too much of a certain gender or too little or lacking of a certain gender, which will lead to the discussion or the outcome of discussion to not be up to its full potential. Other than that, there will also be a huge decrease in audience demographic, which will disrupt the income of not only the employee but the whole corporation. Since the company lacks gender equality, the support rate of the company would be narrower in terms of the employees who are applying for the job as well as the investors. Other than that, more adults would also avoid applying for companies that are unequal because everyone would want to be treated the same. We would all want to be given equal opportunities and not be treated differently just because of our gender. Thus, companies that do not support gender equality would have a much difficult time recruiting people, leading to a much higher job turnover. Other than that, there's also a disadvantages to its employees. For my first point, in my opinion, I think would be experienced more by women or female employees. They aren't able to get higher ranking positions such as the CEO position or the MD position. And even if it is possible, there is a higher possibility of a male employee receiving that position instead, even if there is a female employee that can do much better at that job. Then my next point would probably be experienced more by male employees who are not able to balance their work and family lifestyle. Since they are expected to work a lot more, they are given much more workload and are expected to spend more time in the office, which would lead them to not be able to spend more quality time with their loved ones, which will result in various relationship problems and unhealthy habits such as not getting enough sleep or not getting enough food. And with all these problems, the employees are bound to go through a mental burnout and experience more health issues. The stress level increases, which would lead to unhealthy and overworked lifestyles. And some employees might even start to feel exhausted and worn out, which will not only affect their health mentally and physically, but the quality of their work as well. Now, gender equality at workplaces is a win-win situation. Both genders benefit from gender equality. For men are able to have a more balanced work and family lifestyle. Since they aren't expected to work so much, they get to spend more time with their family members. They also get to focus more on their health and their own lives outside of work. And as for male employees who are fathers, they get to be more involved in their child's life and watch them grow up and be involved caregivers. As for the female employees, they have better access to better income, so they don't have to rely on other people to have a stable income. And I think this applies most for women employees who are single mothers as well, who not only have to feed themselves but their child as well. So this shows that they don't have to rely on other people to live comfortably or to get basic needs. And other than that, the stereotype of women not being able to obtain higher ranking positions will also be broken. If gender equality at workplaces is achieved, both genders are able to understand each other better. They can find common ground and work together to achieve a common goal. Other than that, there will also be less stress and less health problems among the employees. Employees will also get to live happier and healthier lifestyles, which will significantly improve the life satisfaction of employees. Here I have some data proving Malaysian workplaces that show gender inequality. So the first one is the United Nations has listed Malaysia as one of the top countries in encouraging women to participate in applying for jobs of higher ranking in the public sector. As for the pay gap differences in Malaysia, women degree holders on an average get about 76% of what men get paid in 2017. Other than that, in 2004, the government committed to filling at least 30% of the key roles in the public sector with women. And in 2017, women comprised of only 36%. So as you can see by this data, the numbers have a slight increase, but as I said, it's very slight, and gender equality is yet to be achieved. Now moving on to what we can do. First, we can start by giving them a voice. We can ensure the employees that their opinions matter and that their opinions should be taken into account, just like any other person. Next, corporations can take part in promoting equal gender rights at workplaces. Ideally, companies that are bigger or have a bigger platform should set an example to other corporations by allowing equal gender rights and equal opportunities to their employees. For example, Deloitte was ranked by Forbes as one of the best places to work at, as it is very gender equal and it provides maternity leaves for fathers and mothers. So new parents who have a newborn have time off to focus on their child. Other than that, having a vision that is proactive and effective. The government, companies, and society should work together to promote gender equality. For example, New Zealand has a static gender gap difference since 2017, as all their employees are receiving equal pay roles solely based off their job rankings. Youth responsibility. First, we can start by holding forums, discussions, talks, research meetings such as this among each other often. This is so that we are able to raise awareness to the public, especially the children and the youth who are going to be the leaders of the future. In my opinion, I think the message could be conveyed easier if it's coming from people of the same age, as we are able to relate to each other more. Other than that, highlighting the problem of women in receiving lack of food and shelter, as well as receiving stable income and higher paid positions, can be highlighted through communities and organizations. This is so that we are able to show the importance of both genders and how we need to balance them out to ensure happier and healthier lifestyles to everyone, as well as a more balanced economical value to the country. This message should be taught to the youth from a young age so that they are able to stand up for what is right. As a result, we are able to gain a sense of leadership and actively take part in issues concerning the future. And other than that, we will also have a firm belief for what we stand for. In this case, is gender equality. We are also able to share our concerns with people in charge as we will gain confidence. So people in charge, such as the policymakers, company owners, and the government, should listen to our problems. Other than that, we are able to engage the support of more people, especially the youth, in achieving gender equal rights. This is all from me and my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanira, for your presentation. And now we'll move on to our Q&A session. Does any participant have any questions they would like to put forward to Shanira?
Okay, I do have a question for Sandra. So, as well as we know that currently men or boys are dominate to being in a leadership role, how you or we as a youth support to speak up for women or girls out there for more senior roles as equal as men do? Thank you.
Okay. So thank you for your question, Charlotte. What I think is very effective is we should actively speak up. So other than social media and promoting gender equality on social media, we can also take part in silent protests. So going to places which we know are gender unequal and protesting there. Or other than that, we can also sign petitions and do it constantly, not just jumping on the bandwagon, such as the BL Black Lives Matter program, when everyone was signing petitions and suddenly it just stopped and only a few people were actually doing it and not everyone else was like taking it into account anymore. So what I think we should do is constantly sign petitions and actively take part in promoting gender equality.
Thank you, Charlotte, for your question, and thank you, Shanira, for your answer. Does any other participant have questions they would like to ask Shanira?
Hi, Shanira. I just have a quick question. Is there also a gender wage gap between straight individuals and members of the LGBT?
I think there is, because in general in Malaysia, the LGBTQ isn't talked about often or isn't represented as much as they should be, which causes for the lack of payroll as well, because their voices aren't being heard and they're mostly looked down upon in Malaysia. So yes, there is an income gap.
Thank you, Robert, for your question, and thank you, Shanira, for your answer. Does any other participant have any more questions? All right, if there's no more questions, we shall move on to the questions from the YouTube Live. For the first question, do you think other factors besides gender pay play a role in the gender wage gap?
For the gender wage gap, there are other factors, but the main factor is probably because of gender equality and how certain genders are looked down upon and how they are expected to act a certain way. So some people who stand for a certain gender would only expect this gender to do this specific skill. So they would only recruit this specific gender and they will get the pay. When the other gender, they didn't do research or they didn't even involve the other genders and they wouldn't know, thus leading to them not getting enough pay. So I think there is other factors as well, but this factor is probably the main factor and the most contributing to gender inequality.
Now for the next question. What do you think we, the younger generation, can do to break away from the problematic traditional views on gender roles?
Well, first I think that we're on the right path, kind of, because a lot of the youth have social media accounts and we're all not afraid to voice out our opinions on social media accounts. So if we carry this on and if we bring it to higher ground and constantly raise awareness on this, we are able to overcome the problem. And As for the traditions, we should realize that time is passing and that everything is changing and everything is modernizing and everyone is having a more broader mindset. So it's only fair if everyone gets with the time and actually, do what they can do now and use everything they have now.
Thank you, Shanira. For the next question, do you think Malaysia should elect a female prime minister? If so, why?
I wouldn't say elect a female prime minister just because she's a female. We have to take other things into account, like whether she can actually lead the country. But I don't see a problem with a female prime minister. As long as she has the sense of leadership and she can lead the country well, it doesn't really matter what gender she is.
Thank you. And on to our next question. Why do you think that there's a stereotype that women don't work hard at their respective jobs?
Like I said before, it's a stereotype because it's happened so much in the past. People are looking back at the past and not taking in what is happening in the present. So last time they were always thought, oh yeah, women are going to stay at home and they're going to help around the house. So they're probably not going to do enough. They're probably not going to do a good job at work or at office spaces. So I think that's one of the main reasons why female employees are poorly represented, even though it's not true.
Thank you, Shanira. And our next question. Are there any Malaysian or international or global companies which unfortunately practice gender inequality?
There are a lot of companies practicing gender inequality, but so far, companies such as, I don't really they don't really voice it out often for companies that are unequal, because companies that are equal in Malaysia, they are promoted so much that it's very rare to find companies that are unequal because they tend to stay on the quieter side, or people don't say much because of the stigma around gender inequality.
And our next question. How do we create equality for everyone while respecting social norms in our community?
I think that the most prominent way we can do this is by raising awareness. Just solely raising awareness, bit by bit, we are able to achieve gender equality, and it isn't harmful. Gender raising awareness for gender inequality isn't harmful, as well as, like I said before, silent protests, they aren't harmful, and it is all done for a good cause, and it's not offending anyone.
And on to our last question. What is the role of the government to prevent gender inequality in workplaces?
Okay, so for the government, I think that they should maybe set a guideline for companies to follow. So maybe have a specific rate of a certain gender at that company, or it depends on the company as well. So the governments can divide the companies. So companies that work on this should have this amount, and the companies that work on something else should have another amount of different employees and of different genders. So I think if the government starts with that, gender equality can be achieved.
Thank you, Shanira, for answering all the questions, and thank you to everyone who asked the questions. And now we will take our 5-minute break. Please do turn off your cameras and your mics, and see all of you soon. Welcome back, everyone. Our short break has ended. And now, we'll move on to our last, but definitely not least, our last presenter, L. Francine O. Cervantes.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am El Francino Cervantes from Philippine Science High School, Zamboanga Peninsula Region Campus. Please allow me to screen share my slides. My presentation is entitled Towards a Gender Binary World.
Sorry,
Let me
Francine.
start first.
Sorry to interrupt, but we can't see your slides. Would you mind?
Oh my god, I'm sorry.
Would you mind if our tech support team takes over and presents your slides?
Wait, let me see. It says that I'm presenting now. Wait. It's okay. It has the same content anyway, so yeah, sure.
All right, tech support team, please screen share the slides. All right, Francine, you can start.
Is this? Oh, I can't see my slides now. Wait lang. Okay. Wait, I'm sorry, I can't see my slides now. And
No,
presenting already?
it's presenting, but we can't see your slides. Please present.
Oh, Elaine. Can you see my slide now?
Francine, it's okay. You can just let our tech support team help you.
Okay. Yes, okay.
Can you see your slides, Francine?
No, I still can't. Oh, okay, it's there.
All right.
Okay. Good afternoon once again. I am El Francino Cervantes from Philippine Science High School, Zamboanga Peninsula Region Campus. And this is my presentation about gender inequality. So the title of my presentation is Towards a Gender Bias-Free World. Next slide, please. Okay, let's start with a short introduction. Now, what is social inequality? Well, according to Science Direct, social inequality existed from the time of Aristotle and Plato up until today. So it includes social hierarchy and exclusion because of the difference in classes, gender, and statuses, and etc. Now, next, what is gender inequality? So it is an idea that one gender is greater than another. It contributes to unequal treatment and enjoyment of rights of men and women due to gender roles that are set by the society. Now, why did I choose this topic? So what is my purpose? I know that this is a very common topic and because it exists in every part of the world. So that is the main reason why I choose this topic. And also to raise awareness about the effects of this gender inequality worldwide and to encourage everybody to take part in bridging the gap between different genders. Next slide, please. Now let's start with the gender norms. Well, according to Sislaghi and his in 2019, it is a society followed and accepted roles for men and women, which affects their access to resources, freedom, and furthermore, their power, voices, and sense of self. Next. So an example would be from a study of Narayan in 2017, which shows the most common gender role is about men women being housemakers and should take care of their children, while men being the breadwinners and to feed and support their family. Another data from Pan American Health Organization shows that 1 of 5 males in America could not reach the age of 50 because of toxic masculinity culture. So this includes the idea that men should be physically and emotionally strong. So this in turn contributes to higher suicide rates and accidents. Next slide, please. Now, let's go to gender inequality at school. So, from a data from the UNICEF in 2019, it shows that more than half of the illiterate youth in the world are women. Next. In addition to that, I found a data from UNICEF also, which shows the gender parity index for primary enrollment. So, as we can see here, approximately 2/3 of the world has this light blue, which means that in every 100 boys, there are 97 to 103 females that are enrolled. Now, next. Now, why does this happen? So, in a study from Rao and Gupta in 2006, there are a lot of factors that contributes to why women are more illiterate. But one of the main reasons why is child marriages, which is very common in Arab and African countries. Next. Well, from a data of UNICEF, it shows that 21% of women worldwide marries before 18. And this contributes to 12 million girls per year that marries before the age of 18. So an example would be Rashida Khatun. She was a 14-year-old girl that was invited to a marriage that she didn't know was her own. But luckily, she is now enrolled in the UN program, which promotes basic literacy and numeracy and life skills. So in an interview, she said that when she go to school, she didn't know anything, and she didn't know that children had rights or child marriages was a violation of those rights, or was it actually illegal. Next. Now let's go to gender bias at work. So I found a graph from a World Economic Forum which shows the salary gap between men and women in 10 years. So in the year 2018, there is approximately 23,000 US dollars as an average salary for men, while women only have about 12,000 US dollars as salary. Next. In addition to that, only 33 of the top 500 US companies were 33 out of 500 CEOs of top 500 US companies were women. So actually this is a progress, because in 2018 there are only 24 women, and we can see that according to International Labor Organization, that women contribute to the minority in the labor market force. Next. So one of the reasons why is that more than 1/4 of the women and men prefer families with stay-at-home women. So this goes back to the gender norms that women should stay at home and take care of their children. Next. So an example would be Paulette Light. She was from an Ivy League school and was highly qualified for her job, but she had to leave her career because her children needed her more. Next. So I also found a data that about discrimination of LGBTQ plus members in the workplace, and shows that lesbian and gays are more discriminated in the workplace. Next. But luckily, in 2019, there are already 77 countries that prohibit gender discrimination at work. So I hope that soon enough, all of the countries will also do that. Next. To sum everything up, so the gender norms that was introduced to us as a child will contribute to the gender inequality at school, and will also affect gender inequality at work. Next. So here are some related data. In the data here, it is a data from UN, I guess, that shows that in 1995, 65 million, there are almost more than 200 million girls that drops out from their school. Well, in 2020, there are only 100 million girls that dropped out from their school. So this is actually a bit of a progress, and it shows that there is a 10% increase in the female youth literacy, and child marriages were not that more often. Next. So I also found a data from World Economic Forum, which shows that in Asia, Philippines is number one in the most gender equal country. Well, at first I was shocked to know this because as what I can see in my country, there are still a lot of discrimination that is going on. But I believe one of the main reasons why Philippines is a top one is because there are laws protecting women, and there is the OG bill that still in the Senate, I guess, which protects the rights of LGBTQ plus members. Next. Now, what can we do? One thing that we can do is to cooperate, because there are already a lot of organizations promoting gender equality that create a lot of programs such as the UN Women. Next. Another thing that we can do is we can be the catalyst for change. We can use the power of social media to inform everybody towards awareness and to encourage everybody to understand why gender equality is equal. Next. Another thing that we can do is to motivate others, because if everybody would take part and would want to have gender equality, then I believe that we can finally bridge the gap between different genders. Next. So this is an example of the program which was created by the UN Women. This this promotes gender equality. Next. So just like what I said earlier, that there are a lot of existing organizations already, but still gender inequality still exists. So as group, I hope that we will do our part in promoting gender equality. Next. So these are my references. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Francine, for your presentation. And now we'll move on with our Q&A session. Does anyone have any questions they would like to put forward to Francine?
Yes, I do. Francine, what do you think are some of the practices that can be done by the youth to overcome the patriarchal standards that have been set by the generations before us?
One of the things that the youth can do is to read and to make older people understand why gender equality is very important. The other thing that we can do is to do not allow gender discrimination when it comes to gender and other kinds of discrimination in our society. So you cannot tolerate discriminators. Okay, that's.
Thank you, Francine, and thank you, Shanira, for your question. Does any other participant have any questions for Francine?
Hi, Francine.
Yes, I do.
just have a quick question.
Okay.
So, there are lots of organizations that support the LGBT community, but are there any organizations that explicitly support trans people? Because now there's a big issue with trans people not being as represented.
I believe there is, but I don't really know what specific organization, but I believe that I saw one. I forgot the name actually. But when it comes to LGBTQ, there are already a lot of organizations and people that are promoting the rights of LGBTQ and protecting them.
Thank you, Robert, for the question, and thank you, Francine, for your answer. And Charlotte, do you have a question?
Okay, yes, I do. So, Francie, I would like to ask how people could obey gender norms in our society.
Okay, so thank you for that. I believe that in order for the people to obey gender, what do you mean obey gender norms or go against gender norm?
Obey the gender norm.
I actually believe that we should, if the gender norms are preventing someone to do something that they want and preventing them from having certain opportunities and rights, then we should go against the gender norms. That is my stand against on that.
Thank you, Charlotte, for your question, and thank you, Francine, for your answer. Are there any more participants that would like to ask any more questions?
I do have a question actually. So, Francine, what do you think will be the most effective way we as youth can do to help change the mindset of the elder generation? Because we have known that gender inequality is a systemic issue. So how can we do to help so that it's not going on any longer? Thank you.
So, thank you for that. So, I believe that one thing that we can do is to use the power of social media because I believe older people also use that. So we can use social media as a platform to encourage everybody and to let them understand why gender equality is a must because everybody have rights and this gender norms and gender inequalities are preventing some people to have their own rights and opportunities. So I believe we should make older people understand.
Thank you, Hua, for your question, and thank you, Francine, for your answer. If there's no more questions from the participants, we'll move on to the questions from the YouTube Live. So the first question, have you or anyone you know faced harsh... I'm sorry, I think Francine is having some technical difficulties. Please hold on for a moment. Hi, Francine.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
The connection was lost.
I'll repeat the question. Have you or anyone you know faced harsh rejection based on your ethnicity or gender?
Well, friends who are having a hard time saying to the parents that are gay or bisexual because they are afraid that their parents might disconnect them and there are a lot of people that are rejected from jobs because they are lesbians or gay and I believe that should stop because everybody should have the opportunity to do something that they want to show themselves to the world. That is all.
Thank you, Francine. And our next question. I don't think we have any more questions after that. Thank you, Francine, for your presentation. And our forum for this session and the Sales Online Forum 2020 has come to an end. First and foremost, thank you to all our panelists for providing their insightful views on the topic social inequality. And thank you to all of you who attended this forum. We do hope it has benefited you in one way or another. And we hope to see all of you soon. Thank you. For the participants, please don't leave yet. We would like to take a group photo.